Hey, welcome back to Ken O'Connor Racing. This is our 2013 YZ250. We found some transmission problems in here, so basically we got all the parts in. You might notice I've got a whole bunch of OEM stuff laying around. That's what I do on all of this. All of the gaskets, seals, I don't even mess around. I'm not going to buy gasket sets. The OEM parts are just so much better that we'd just rather do that. With the understanding a lot of this stuff is getting shipped, and God only knows where. I mean, it could be going out of the country. We cannot ever afford to have an engine come back here. We don't want that, but we can't afford it either. Just shipping alone overseas, it could cost hundreds of dollars just because you wanted to save $3 on a clip. So we just don't play that game. Everything that we're going to put in here is OEM to fix it. We did find some problems with gears and the transmission. We're going to be changing all of the transmission forks. And I'll show you who we use for parts and how we go about getting this stuff figured out. Alright, this is a parts list from our good friends over at Motorsports Nation in Plainfield, Connecticut. And what I do with these guys is I basically pull all of the part numbers out of a microfiche, copy paste them into a word processor, send them a list. They go ahead and place an order for me. When I get my parts back, the next thing I do is I check everything. But he's human. There's probably 50 parts, separate parts on this order. So I go ahead and I check everything, make sure we got all the parts that we ordered. Everything checks out at this point. Next thing I'm going to do is show you what we're going to do about these transmission gears and shafts. I went ahead and disassembled the primary shaft and just lay everything out in order so we can see what we have. You're going to need something like this. I am a sucker for a good deal. I think it's a whole set of snap ring pliers. I got this at some yard sale, I think, for like 25 bucks. I thought it was a super deal. I've had it for years. It works really well. You don't need anything like that. Just a couple different sets will work for you. And when I take this transmission apart, I get in a habit of pulling things off of the shaft and setting it down. This is not hard to do. The biggest mistakes you can make are reusing any of these clips or putting it together wrong. What we found in here is the corners of these dogs. Look at this one on the left side. See how it's all rounded? It's not good. You want those nice sharp edges. Looks a little better on this side. And another one, you can probably see it a little better on this one. Look at the left side. See how it's all rounded? That's just going to keep flopping out of gear. If you have a bike, look at that one, nice and sharp right here. If you have a bike that's falling out of gear, 99 times out of 100, this is what your problem is. Especially on the YZs. Anything rounded like that's got to go. So we figured out what we need for parts, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw this shaft back together with all the parts we just purchased. And just so you can see the comparison, is a new gear. Nice sharp corners. And there's its brother. It's this corner we're looking at right here. And just lay it out, all the new stuff with the old, check everything, make sure it's all good, and I'm going to put it together. Alright, getting ready to start throwing some gears and washers and everything. And just be aware that these clips, you never reuse them. That's the first rule. And the other rule is, this has a sharp edge and a rounded side on the inside. This is retaining this gear this way on this shaft. You can't go that way. So you want to put the sharp end of this clip facing up to keep that from popping off. If you put the radius side on, it probably won't, but it's possible. We saw it happen on the other side. It may pop off, so always a sharp side, keeping pressure down, so on the opposite end. So if that makes any sense, we're going to go ahead and put these clips on using snap ring pliers, not screwdrivers. Hey, I've got my transmission shaft, all the gears are on it, but I just want to show you one thing. If you can see the opening right here in that clip, this is the old clip. Look at the difference of that gap. That's why you never reuse these things. This thing will be good to go now. Alright, I got my shafts all assembled. Everything's good in there. And the next thing I'm looking at is the forks. See some wear here. Starting here, here, and we saw that on all three of them. very minuscule on this, but we know we have a problem. And like I say, the last thing, this guy's going to Florida with this. Last thing I want to do is get a phone call that he's got problems. So it's the right thing to do. So we got all three brand new shift forks, and we'll be installing that when we get the bottom half together. I'm going to clean the cases, lap them next. Okay, we removed the bearing. We had all of the problems with the clip, and it's, you know, you can definitely feel some resistance in it. It's just, I think this bearing is $17. Just makes sense to change it. And there's a bunch of crap under it too that we would have never been able to get out of there without pulling the bearing. And the tool we use to do that is just one of these blind bearing puller, slap hammer. Works good. Well, we went ahead and got the cases nice and clean, lap, got our new bearings in there. We changed this one, put new main bearings in it. You want to do that on every build we do anyway, but here's your problem. This has to go in one unit, and it, for a lack of a more technical word, it sucks. It's not fun. You can do it, you got to have a little bit of patience, and what we do here is I just strap it together, top and the bottom around the gear with some zip ties. Stay out of the way of your shift forks. Line your shift forks up. Get your shift cam in. And at this point, I'm not going to be able to film it. I'm the only one here right now, but I'm just going to grab everything, and it's all going to stay together. And I'm going to bring it over to the case and just kind of play around with it. It's all going to fall in. There's no washers in there you have to worry about. It's not going to fall apart. Just strap it together good and play around with it. And make sure all of the young children are out of earshot, because you're probably going to say a couple of bad words. Well, it's not even half as bad as I'm making you think it is, but once you get to this point, I'm about halfway in with these shafts, and I can't stress this enough. Don't even think about picking up a hammer here. Don't force anything. It's all a little bit of wiggle here, a little bit of wiggle here, a little wiggle here. Everything's going to work. I've gotten it to the point where this shaft, which is the counter shaft, is through its bearing, and this is just starting in the bearing. But what I got going on down here, this zip tie is just barely touching the case. So we're gonna, at this point, we're gonna cut this away. It's not gonna spread at the bottom, but I'm gonna leave this one intact. But we're gonna cut that zip tie out of there and then finish setting the transmission where it needs to go. That's it. I can cut the bottom zip tie. Get that out of there. Cut the top, and then going to get this thing into its neutral position and testing it. May or may not, depends where the shift cam is. It may or may not rotate over at this point, but next thing I want to do is I want to get it into neutral. And I've got a bunch of videos out there putting different things together, and I do it all the same. I'm going to put the crankshaft in. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to swell the inner race of this bearing, drop the crankshaft right in. No harm, no foul. I've got this tool, had it forever. Just a solid piece of steel. I'm going to take some MAP gas. I'm going to heat this up about 230, 240 degrees, and I'll use an infrared heat gun and monitor the temperature. And once I get it up to that temperature, I'm going to take this, drop it on the inner race of the bearing, wait a minute, and then drop the crankshaft in. Just like that. Once the crank is in and transmission's in, everything's looking good. We're going to use some, this is actually 3-bond 1184. There's a lot of different products by these guys. They keep changing, and I'm thinking it's because of the lead that's in these, or was in it. You can use 1194, 1104, 1184, all made by 3-bond, and we haven't had any problems ever with any of it. The other thing, you can get the factory stuff called Yamabond. Be honest with you, I've never used it. I've always used this aftermarket stuff, and it works perfect. So the other thing I'm going to do is use an acid brush, and I'm just going to put a very thin coat on this side of the case. Everything's been degreased, hence the glove, and don't want to get my greasy, dirty fingers on this, but everything's been degreased with a little bit of brake cleaner. And I'm going to do this case, and then I'm going to do the other one, and then heat the bearing on the other one up and drop it back together. I'd suggest, if you don't do this every day, I do, get a puller set. I think Tusk makes a tool to help you suck the case down on top of this. I've just done it like this so many years with heat that I don't have a problem with it. I am getting some emails, some guys that don't do this all the time, they have a little bit of a issue with it. So buy that tusk puller. I mean, it's fine. It's a good thing to use. But let me get these painted up. The way I do this, just again, I'm here by myself. I don't have anybody filming this, so doing the best we can. I just put a little bit on the brush, and then as thin as you can possibly get it. And I really mean that. You don't. I've heard of guys actually even making videos saying they take this, they put it on their finger and get a whole bunch in there. You don't have to do that. It's gonna compress here and it's gonna come squirting out. I'm putting this on as thin as I can, and I'm still gonna have leftovers. So just make it nice and thin. Do first case, and then we'll show you what to do after that. Got the case bond on the first case. I'm gonna do the same thing here. And one thing I want to bring up: these YZs. You know, don't quote me on this. I'm thinking maybe 2001 up. It could be more than that, but I'm pretty sure that's at least the cutoff point. Make sure you get this gasket. This is the gasket that goes in here, and there's water that runs through this. Believe it or not, this engine, when we took it apart, this gasket was not even there, not even the old one. And a lot of guys will forget this when they're rebuilding. They'll use the old one, and we don't mess around with that. But for a $2 part, just make sure you get that. And we're just going to go ahead and lay the case bond on this, and then get it put together. Okay, boys and girls, same drill. Got the case bond all over the side of the case. Got all my bolts all nice and clean, ultrasonically cleaned, ready to go. Same drill. I'm going to get this I'm going to heat this up. It's getting late. Swell the inner race, and take this whole case. I'm going to pop it over my assembly, and that's going to be the end of it. And get everything torqued up, and we'll have a bottom end. I've got my bearing getting warm so I can slide it over, but just before I forget or you forget, I've had these in for a while. Make sure you put these gudgeon pins, dowel pins, case alignment pins, whatever you want to call them. You got 2 of them, make sure they go in there. Well, here's our assembly. They want to check a few things. I haven't torqued these yet. I'm about to. They're pretty close by hand, but make sure that on the 2013 you've got this little neutral switch over here. Make sure this bracket goes here, and that's 1, 2, 3 bolts from the top, and then just check everything. Make sure nothing's hanging up on you, and crank's turning over fine, nice and easy to turn. We don't have seals in it, so it should be. Anything here that's binding up, something's definitely wrong. If you do assemble an engine with a crank that's very hard to turn over, that means you're getting side load on the bearings, and it's not going to last very long. Like I said, I'm really close on the case bolts, but I'm going to go ahead and torque them. This is my little SK inch-pound wrench. I'm going to go ahead and torque everything here, working from the inside and across pattern, back and forth across the whole thing. Work from the inside out. Everything all torqued up. It's moving nice. And like I said, I'm going to zoom in on this. We put this on with a brush. This stuff does not need to be thick. I'm actually going to take a brush when I get the engine together, and I'm just going to go over this once it's dry and get a nice looking edge. So no reason to put that stuff on thick. Alright, we've got a nice solid free rotating bottom end. Next thing we're going to do is start putting crank seals in. So this is the right side, clutch side. We're going to install that next. OEM seals, always. Use some PC seal grease and coat the inner lip of the seal. Alright, once I get the inner lip of that seal lubed, I'm just going to drive this thing in. This is just a seal driver. This is like a Delrin material. We make these, to suit. We got a whole bunch of them, but I'm just going to drive that seal in until it's flush with the outside of the case. Next piece we're going to assemble is the locking mechanism for the cam. It's the piece that goes on the end of the cam. Balls, whatever you want to call them. Some advice on YZs, YZ125s or YZ250s. If you ever have to take this piece off, throw it away. It's cheap, and what we see happen a lot with YZs, there's a company out there that was making some kind of a part for these. I don't know what they did, but we see a lot of these come off. These engines come in here and that's missing, so we don't even play with it. Any YZ, 125, 250s, anything. Just don't even reuse these. Just change that while you're in there and dodge a bullet. And that's where it goes. So you're going to put a washer down. and your new locking mechanism. Then going to install the bolt. Make sure you put some blue Loctite on the threads. Once this is all locked up, Loctite, make sure it moves. This is one of the easier ones to actually assemble, but you're going to put this outside of your cam, your pawls. I don't know what the hell they call the thing. I know what it is and what it does, but you get this groove on it right up here at the top. We see these come in sometimes too, where they won't shift, and actually a customer tries to do this himself. They'll send an engine and we take it apart. And usually we tell them the first thing to check is make sure that that pin is aligned with this. So we're going to put this on, throw a bolt in, blue Loctite on the end of the bolt, and get everything in here torqued down. Got the bolt all torqued in for the alignment mechanism on the end of the cam. Next thing you have to do is get the spring over this little boss in the case. One thing that's, you can mess with screwdrivers and kill yourself all day. I don't like bloody knuckles. So I got this tool here. I'm on full zoom, but this is pretty cool for grabbing springs and actually doing what you want with them. The other thing this is really good for, and it's built for, is putting exhaust springs on. So that's how we did that. And then this piece is going to go on here. We're going to put a retaining bolt, a little bit of blue Loctite right there. That's holding the seal in. And that's it. Next step is simply just install the other side, the sealer retainer. That's where we were over here at the spring. And just the sealer retainer, some blue Loctite, get that tight. Alright, here's the dog mechanism that we pulled out earlier. And again, if you have small children around you, have them leave the room because you're going to say a couple of curse words. What you got to do is get this thing in here over that bolt and then kind of push these dogs in until everything lines up inside of the actuating mechanism of the cam. And again, I'm shooting this, got my hands in here, not even looking at what I'm doing. I'm going to put this together and come back and show you what it looks like. Well, once I got my face in there so I could look at it, it was actually really easy, and we know that anyway, but you just gotta, these little dogs have to be aligned. Oops. In that area right there, everything's got to be free, and this mechanism should be able to move it around back and forth. This is still loose, and it would be really easy if you could put this in first and then put the plate on after. But in this case, you certainly can't do that. In most cases, you can't. So it's kind of how that has to be done. Just takes a little finesse and a little patience. And I'm going to get some bolts in there and answer my phone. All right, we're back at it after getting a little shut-eye. Once you have the, well, again, let's use proper terminology. Remember, that's called a segment back there. They call this actually a lever, a shift lever, the two shift lever they call it. And then you got a roller right here. So drop that roller in and get these things tight. And again, I like to use a little bit of blue on those. Don't go crazy on it, but the torque's, it's under 8 foot-pounds, so put a little bit of blue Loctite on it. Next thing we do is get the shaft all lubed up and gonna drop it right into that hole right there. Alright, get a little bit of oil. Don't forget this washer. There's a washer that goes in. And then I just drop it right in there. Just like that. Next piece we're going to install is the kick idle gear. Put a little lube up there. Drop the gear on. A bit more oil. The washer. And I wasn't lying. We never reuse those. Brand new part from Yamaha right here. That's the new snap ring. Same procedure with this snap ring. If you look at it, it's more flat on this side, more rounded on this from the stamping process, and we always want the sharp edge going out. The direction that this gear would tend to move, that's the direction we want to put the sharp edge of that clip. We got our idle gear in there. The next thing we're going to put in is the actual kick mechanism itself, and don't forget to put this washer on. It goes in here. We're just going to put a little bit of oil. Another thing you have to look for, try to show it to you. So this right here, that little notch in this plastic bushing, that has to go over that spring. You'll find it on a lot of bikes, so it's always something to look for. 99 times out of 100, if you're having a hard time putting a clutch cover on, not that it's ever happened to me, I'm lying again, that's the problem. This has come undone. Suzuki's are real tricky because it's just a little, it's not cut in as far as it is on this one. So if this piece comes out and gets over that part of the spring, it's going to prevent you from closing your cover. So we're just going to put this mechanism in, wind the spring up, and lock it up right here in the case. Make sure that this tab right here gets under this. It's a little trick I'll show you. We talked about this washer from the kick mechanism. It's kind of hard to put it on the mechanism and then slide everything in, so just I don't assume that anybody knows anything, so we just show you what we can, and just again, they're here to help. So I just put a little Vaseline on that, and that's if I can keep my neighbor Dave Fontaine's fingers out of it. And then just set it right there. It acts as glue, and then I'll just go ahead and load the kick mechanism in there. And that's what it looks like when it's all installed in there, and just a little test. That should move very free. Shouldn't be any resistance on it. Once you get the kick mechanism in, next thing we're going to do is get this primary set up with this funky looking washer, spacer, whatever it is. This gear goes on with the boss down this way. The drive gear goes on over it, and the last piece is going to be the washer and the bolt that secures it. It's not the case on this engine. This one is directional, but just because it has a bevel in here, some Hondas, it's also directional. It'll have a side that says up. It'll be concave on the inside, convex on the outside. The convex side would go up, but this just with that little chamfer that goes up. And I'm going to use some blue Loctite on this and torque this in. I'll look up the torque spec and let you know what it is. The torque on that primary bolt is 40 foot-pounds. I use blue Loctite. This is the setup that I use to torque it. I use that fork underneath the rod. And wouldn't you know, that was the guy that owns this engine. So he just lit a fire under my ass, so we got to get going here. Anyway, back to, we're going to start doing the clutch. I've already put the first washer on. Everything's lubed up. You have the collar. I'm going to put the bearing on next. Just so you know, I change these bearings every time we do an engine in here. The only reason this one is not being changed is because we know the history of the engine. It's so new, and I know why it's in here, and everything here is fine. Everything's working great, but just as a precaution, these things are probably a $16, $18 bearing. Just makes sense to change them, avoid any kind of problems. The next piece is going to be the primary basket. And it just slides over. Make sure it engages the idle gear. You can see it behind it. And the primary gear, just a little rotation. Next piece is the spacer. The hub. And then we're going to take this old washer and put it right back in, right? No. When you buy your engine parts, just it's a no-brainer to change this thing. These tabs go in here. I'm going to put a little Loctite on the nut and get that torqued in. That's 54 foot-pounds. I will double check it and let you know, but I'm going to put some blue Loctite on this and get that torqued up. Alright, I've got set up here to get the nut on this hub tightened up, and it is 54 foot-pounds. Got this tusk holder, and just get my torque wrench in here and start squeezing until she clicks over. Once you get the clutch nut tight, we're going to bend this lock washer over, and I like to just do this with a pair of channel locks. Just get on the edge of it and just kind of bend it over. I don't think we're going to be able to film it. I'm going to have to get right in here, but just get on it, squeeze it, and pull it over at the same time. And that's what it looks like when you get it bent over. Just like that. And you get the clutch rod in there next. We'll point it in, that goes in. And it's a good idea, I've got this all looped up already. It's a good idea, get on the other side. See what just happened, how that dropped in? And get the actuating rod. And just while you got everything nice and loose, make sure it's bottoming out, make sure it's moving when you move the actuating rod up. Let's get some plates in here next. Okay, again, not going to assume that you know anything. We don't want to miss any steps. First plate that goes in, you have two plates. You have fiber plates, and you have steel or aluminum plates. First plate that goes in is a fiber. And be cautious, some bikes, the first and the last fiber plate are made out of different materials than the rest of them. So just double check that on your microfiche. Make sure you're dealing with the same part number. Next piece that goes in is these are steel plates on these. And again, same thing as the snap rings, where they have two sides. These are stamped, so one side's always going to be sharper than the other. I like to put the dull side, if you will, or the radius side facing up whenever I put these plates. I just get all of those in, just alternate, fiber, steel, fiber, steel. I'm going to put the pressure plate on next, and we're skipping a lot of steps on here as far as inspection when you're doing the assembly, because actually I know how much time is on this, which is almost nothing. But just check your primary basket, make sure it's not all grooved up in these sections right here. Obviously make sure your clutch plates aren't blue, and then your pressure plate. You don't want a big divot in here. Make sure it's not worn. It should be nice and flat. And then you just install it over the hub and just twist it. Make sure it snaps in there. This pressure plate should be touching at this point. It should be touching the first fiber plate. We'll get our springs in next. Once you get your springs in, just get the retaining bolts in, and I'm just going to crank these down and go back and forth and get everything bottomed out, and then I'm going to torque these to 7.2 foot-pounds, convert it over to inch pounds, and go from there.